Our brother from France is revealing to me that all over France, they call it credit. You take a credit means you take a bank loan on interest. They call that a credit. And he says all over France, the ulama gave fatwa that this is permissible, this is halal. He says, Sheikh, it seems to me as though we are doing exactly what the Jews did before us and what the Christians did before us. So I said, it's the same thing in the United States of America. I lived in the United States for 12 years. And we're living in an age in which our scholars of Islam are failing and failing miserably. Miserably, okay? What is it that explains this failure? Tu peux comprendre? Quand je parle en anglais? All right. What is it that explains this failure? And part of the explanation is that the subject is not taught in the Darul Uloom. The Darul Uloom does not have on its curriculum, it does not have a study of the modern world, le monde moderne. Il ne étudie pas le monde moderne. It does not study modern economics. The graduate of the Darul Uloom knows nothing about monetary economics. No. He knows nothing about Bretton Woods. He knows nothing about the International Monetary Fund. And yet he gives fatwa that the paper money is halal. Okay? This is not only foolish. Don't say about things you don't know. When you send a question to me and I don't know the answer, I send the question to a scholar who has the competence to answer. If you send the question to me in Islamic medical ethics, is it permissible for me to have a heart transplant? That fellow is eating pork and drinking wine and his heart is filled with lust and this, and I have to get his heart. Is that permissible? Is it permissible for me to have kidney transplant? He's drinking alcohol all his life and I'm going to get his kidney. Is it permissible to have an eye transplant? Okay? The scholar of Islamic medical ethics would be able to answer him. So I send the question to the one who knows. But our muftis don't do that. When it comes to questions on money, on riba, they don't send it to the one who has the knowledge. No, he's misguided. This Imran Hosein is misguided. And then they issue their fatwas for which they pay a price in the grave. That's the only answer I can give. The absence of knowledge and then stupidity of speaking and writing on subjects where you don't have the knowledge. Yeah. Dr. Ansari.
Next question from Ashraf. Very complicated in terms of call and put options. Imam. Is that something you have understanding of in shares and so on? The question is, an option contract is an agreement between the buyer and seller. It gives the purchaser the option, the right to buy or sell a particular asset at a later date of an agreed upon price. Option contracts are often used in securities contracts and real estate transactions, speculation. Is this halal?
Answer. In Islam, you cannot sell that which you do not own. You must legally have legal ownership of something before you can sell it. Islamic banking system today says that we can help you out of riba. You want to buy the house and you don't have the cash to pay for it. So we will buy the house. The market price of the house is £100,000. Anybody who has £100,000 can go and buy the house, cash. So we, the Islamic Bank, will buy the house for 100,000 cash. And then we will sell it to you for 200,000, 300,000. And we'll give you time to pay for it. And since both buyer and seller are aware of the purchase price, the cash price, this is a halal transaction because it's called murabaha. A murabaha transaction is one in which both buyer and seller are aware of the profit margin. A murabaha transaction is one in which both buyer and seller are both aware of the profit margin. We're coming to the option just now. So this is a murabaha transaction because both buyer and seller are aware that the market price of the house is £100,000. And the buyer is prepared to buy it for £300,000, so a profit margin of £200,000. Halal. We say no. It would be a halal transaction if it's a cash transaction. But if a buyer is prepared to pay £300,000 cash for a house he can buy in the market for £100,000 cash, then you should make an appointment for him to see a psychiatrist. Yeah. He's not, his mind is gone. Why then is he willing to pay 300,000 for the house when it's 100,000? Answer is because you get time. Time. Credit transaction. The difference between the credit price and the cash price is because of time. The question posed by the banker this morning is, why does money not have a time value? The answer is that in Islam, money can increase only through business or through effort. وَأَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Money cannot increase by itself. When Aristotle wrote his famous Nicomachean Ethics, in that book Aristotle said money is not like a woman. A woman could increase by giving a baby. Money can't make a baby. No. Money cannot increase by itself. So money does not have a time value. No. And so credit price and cash price must always be the same. A credit transaction is a halal transaction, provided that the credit price is not higher than the cash price. But the bank, when it offers to sell you the house for £300,000, is selling what it does not own. The bank never buys the house. No. The bank never has legal ownership of the house. No. Go and ask any Islamic bank. What the bank does is to issue a check for 100,000, and you will take that check for 100,000 and you will buy the house in your name. And then the bank will have a lien on the house. The viewpoint of Islam, the law of Islam rather, is that you cannot sell what you do not own. An option is not ownership. An option is a right to buy. And you cannot sell a right to buy in Islam, no.
We have about 10 further questions, Sheikh, so let's move on quickly. Ashraf says, controversial question. With the Saudi control of Haram Sharif, knowing that all funds from Hajj go to the Saudi Wahhabi state, in your opinion, do you think your Hajj is accepted or permissible?
This is for after 5 o'clock. After 5 o'clock. We can go until 10 o'clock. Next one.
Origin of Riba. Can a person pay back more money in debt due to the decrease of money value?
Every transaction based on money which is haram has to be a haram transaction. If you have a transaction using money and the money which you're using is haram, then the transaction will have to be haram. All the money being used in the world today, all, is haram. All. And hence the fact that money is losing value through inflation, okay? Money is losing value, so when you have to pay back, what you pay back does not have the same value as what you borrowed. The manner in which you resolve this problem, which is in the next session really, is that your loan has to be denominated in dinar and dirham. I am not borrowing 100,000 pounds from you, no. We're converting the 100,000 pounds to dinar. And if the 100,000 pounds is 1,000 dinars, then the loan is for 1,000 dinars. So when I have to repay you, I'll repay you 1,000 dinars. Yeah.
Next question. If someone rents his house to a person A for a guaranteed monthly rent of 1,000, person A then rents it further to person B for 1,500, is that halal? A lot of real estate questions coming up after this.
I don't think I have the competence to answer that question. Yeah. Next question.
If Gog and Magog have spread all over the world, in the Quran you just said that the world was built so they would stay behind. If for a point in time, is the wall being removed? Number two, what is the answer to
Oh, no. At my age, questions should be posed only one at a time.
one entity?
A young man, you can give him 2, 3 questions. Okay, the wall was built. And he used blocks of iron to build it. Huge wall, blocks of iron. If you say the wall is still standing, and Gog and Magog have not as yet been released, then I say, well, what are you doing in London? You should show some respect for the Quran. Something that is located in the geography of the Quran. Allah speaks of it in the Quran. And it is still there and you are not searching for it? How come? And today you don't even need to go to a travel agency and buy a ticket to fly. You could stay home with something called a computer, and you go to something called Google Earth, and they have mapped out every square inch of the earth. And you could sit down in your bedroom and search the whole earth. Yes, even if you have your car parked up in front of your house, they can see it. Because they have the satellites all over. So why aren't you searching for the wall? How come no one, from the time of the revelation of the Quran to this day, we don't have any evidence? It's not, if the evidence is there, show it to me of anyone who saw the wall. Rather, we have Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam asleep at the home of his wife Zainab radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And while sleeping he had a vision. It was a terrible vision. And he woke up from his sleep and his face was flushed red. Whatever it is he saw was terrible. And when he woke up, he said, "Wailul lil Arab min sharrin qad iktaraba." Woe unto the Arabs because of a great evil which is now close. And then he raised his hands like this, and he said, "Today a hole has been made in the radam." Radam, he didn't say sad. Radam is different from sad. Sad is just a wall. Radam is a dam, something built like a dam. Today a hole has been made in the radam of Gog and Magog, of Zulkarnain, indicating that when Allah said, Zulkarnain said, هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. This barrier which has been built is an act of mercy from Allah, in consequence of an act of mercy from Allah. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ جِئْنَا No. فإذا جاء وعد ربي جاء له دكا وكان وعد ربي حقا. When that time comes, when the warning of my Lord is to come to pass, He's going to bring down this barrier, and the warning of the Lord God will transpire. So Allah is going to bring down the barrier. And Nabi Muhammad ﷺ says, today Allah is beginning the process of breaking down the barrier. Today a hole has been made. Then she asked, أَنُهْلَكُ وَفِينَا الصَّالِحُونَ. Will we be destroyed, we Arabs, while there are righteous people amongst us? Will this happen? And he answered and he said, yes. إِذَا كَثُرَ الْخَبَثُ. When garbage prevails. And if you look around you today in the world, it is a world in which garbage now prevails all around the world. And so the destruction of the Arabs is now going to take place. So that wall came down long time ago. No longer exists today. You can go and search for it. In consequence of the fact, Gog and Magog were released in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. The Indian scholar, Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, in the year 1917, in response to the Bolshevik Revolution, produced an amazing Urdu couplet in poetry. Amazing. It's amazing because it's so absolutely accurate. He said, "Khul gaye Ya'juj aur Ma'juj ke lashkar tamam." All the armed forces, all the forces of Gog and Magog have now been released. Chashme Muslim dekh le tafsir harfi yansilun. The attention of the Muslim must now be directed to that passage in the Quran in Surah Al-Anbiya, which ends with the word yansirun. Wa haramun ala qaryatin ahlaknaha annahum la yarji'un hatta idha futihat Ya'juj wa Ma'juj wa hum min kulli hadabin yansilun. So Iqbal is referring to that. It is absolutely amazing that Iqbal in 1917 could produce this couplet, that all the armed forces of Gog and Magog are now released. And yet after that, he never said a word. He was totally silent after that on this subject. I guess if he had said a single more word, he never would become Sir Muhammad Iqbal.
From the same person, two related questions, not as difficult, maybe for a quick answer. What is the answer to avoid Riba, knowing that the web around us is so tight it is impossible to come out?
Next session.
Real estate questions. How do you buy a house if you can't get a mortgage?
The best way is not to buy it. No. I grew up in a village in which nobody ever went to borrow money. It was considered to be something unethical, something disgraceful, to borrow money to build a house. I grew up in a village in which everybody would join together to help you with a hammer and with nails and so on, a community effort to help. And you would build one room, and then you'll build another room, and slowly you will build your house. And when you had no money to put doors and windows, you took a rice bag and you put it there for the window and the doors. Yeah. And when my father died, my mother got some money from the government because my father was a school principal. And with that money, she tried to build a house. But the money was finished before the house could be finished. And so when we moved into the house, we didn't have windows. We didn't have windows. But nobody laughed at us. No. Because you did not go and borrow money to build a house. If you didn't have windows, you waited until you have money and you put a bag or something there. Nobody borrowed money. So what has happened to that way of life? What has happened to that way of life? When my father died and my mother is struggling now with orphan children, and sometimes she didn't have any money. So she said to me to take a taxi because my father died, we had a car, but nobody to drive the car. So we had to sell the car. Go to auntie and ask her whether we can borrow $100. So I'd get in a taxi and I go to my aunt's home, and my aunt will give me the 100. I'll come back and give it to my mother. But when my mother borrowed $100 from auntie, she could not eat. She could not digest her food until she had repaid the $100. Because entering into debt and living with debt was something that you wanted to avoid. So do you still want to ask the question? How to buy a house? Huh? The fatwa has been given that there is something called darura, the law of necessity. That when there is necessity, there is no food, and you're starving to death, and the only food available is pork, lahmul khinzir, then the law permits you, even though it is haram, it still remains haram, but the law permits you to eat the pork to stay alive. So they use this as the basis for, we need a house. So we are allowed to borrow money and interest at least to have a house based on the principle of the doctrine of necessity. So I said, wait a minute. When I'm starving to death and I eat the pork, I don't lick my finger. I don't lick my finger. Do I? I don't enjoy it. And when you put the pork on my plate, I would eat the minimum I could possibly eat. How come your plate is so full? How come you're loading your plate? Look at the big house. Is that darura? Are you licking your finger and you're inviting all the family and thing to come from Lahore? Look at the lovely house I bought. You love the pork. You are licking your finger. That's not darura. And the second thing about darura is while I'm eating the pork to stay alive, I'm looking for food. So that on that day when I can get food, I will stop eating the pork. But when you eat the pork, you sign a contract for 30 years of pork. 30 years of pork. Even if food becomes available, you're still eating the pork? No. The way to buy a house, if you want to buy a house and you don't have the cash, is that you have a principle of musharaka. That I have, the house is £100,000 and you only have £10,000. So instead of going to the bank to borrow 90,000, I will put the 90,000 because I have the capital and I want to invest my capital halal to get some income. I don't want to keep sitting on my capital. So this is business. So when the house is bought, it is bought on a basis of a partnership in which you will own 10% of the equity and I'll own 90%. But you're not the owner of the house. This is what the bank does. The bank makes you the owner of the house. Well, we'll not do it this way. See? Since I have 90% of the ownership of the house and you have 10%, then taxes will be paid in accordance with proportion of ownership. I pay 90% of the taxes, you pay 10. And maintenance and repairs, I pay 90%, you pay 10. The bank doesn't do that. No. This is the first contract, the contract of ownership, and it's a partnership. Then we sign a second contract. The second contract is for me to rent the house to you, independent of the first contract. I will rent the house to you. But I will not determine the rent, and you will not determine the rent. The rent is determined independently by mutual agreement on the basis of the market rental value. And when you pay the rent every month, 90% of the rent comes to me and 10% goes back to you. Good. But the rental contract is a rental to buy contract. That anytime you want to increase your ownership of the house, you have the right to buy from me, from my 90%. But in Islam, business is always contracted on the basis of the market. So you cannot have a predetermined price of the house, that this is the price we paid when we bought the house. No, because price of the house, value of the house can go up and go down. So every time you want to buy from me, you're going to buy at the market value of the house. This can be done through valuation, and we can agree that a valuation is valid for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years or so. And eventually you'll buy out all my ownership, and you become the sole owner of the house at much cheaper than through the bank.
Two more questions.
This is explained in this book.
If you already have a mortgage or loan on interest, which you can't get out of, what do you do?
If you already have a mortgage or a loan on interest and you can't get out of it, then sell. If it's a house, you sell the house. If it's a car, you sell the car, and you pay off the bank. But sometimes, even after you've sold the car or the house, you still can't pay the bank. Now, that's how skillful they are. So after you've sold the house or the car, whatever it is, and you've used that money to pay the bank, if there's still a residual amount left to get you out of debt, then in Islam it is our duty to help our brothers and sisters to get out of debt.
Complex question on bankruptcy.
Last question.
Last question. Can Muslims take past bankruptcy act for citizens? Explain in light of Sharia and Saudi Arabia has recently done this. Is this okay? Chicago, USA.
There are two kinds of loans. One is called Qard Hasana, and it may be described as a charitable loan. That if the debtor cannot repay the loan, it is written off. But there is a second kind of loan which is not a charitable loan, and it is called dain, and you'll find it in the second to last verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, very long verse, one of the longest in the Quran. And this is a loan in which there is a legal obligation, not a moral obligation, to repay. And if it cannot be repaid, then that debtor is considered to be bankrupt. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of Allah, please help me, my creditors are after me. My creditors are after me, I don't have the money to repay." But this was not a Qard Hasana. This was a dain. If it was a Qard Hasana, the Prophet could say to the lenders to write off the loan. But because it was dying, he could not do that. So he took everything that the man had and sold it, left him with only the clothes on his back, and divided that amongst the creditors. And then after that, whatever was left is now written off. So he's free from debt. This is bankruptcy in Islam. This is bankruptcy in Islam. So yes, we have a system of bankruptcy in Islam. But this is only for such debts which are dain, not qard hasana. And when you declare bankruptcy, you can't keep your BMW. And you can't keep your house in, give me an upscale residential area, South Hall? Mayfair. You can't keep your BMW and your house in Mayfair and yet apply for bankruptcy. No, not in Islam. You have to give up everything and all you remain with is the clothes on your back. Okay, we finished with this session and
Signings,
huh?
any book signings?
Sinex?
Signing books?
Yes, but instead of coming back at 4 o'clock, let's make it 4:15, so I get a little rest for my throat. Okay? 4:15, inshallah.